Do you remember walking into a cafeteria where the air smelled like pot roast and fresh rolls? Where you could see every dish laid out before you made your choice? Where the woman behind the counter wore a hairnet and a genuine smile? And where a full meal, meat, 3 sides, dessert, and sweet tea cost less than what you'd pay for a fast food burger today? If you do, then you lived through something that's almost completely vanished from American life. Before we dive into this story, if these memories resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe. This channel is dedicated to preserving the America we remember, the one that's slowly fading from view. It's a Tuesday evening in 1975. You're walking into Morrison's Cafeteria in Charlotte, North Carolina. The parking lot is full. Families, retirees, church groups, businessmen still in their ties. Inside, the line stretches from the entrance past the steam tables, moving steadily forward. Trays slide along metal rails. The lighting is bright, almost harsh. Everything is visible. You pick up your tray. The first station? Salads. Iceberg lettuce with Thousand Island dressing, carrot and raisin salad, 3 bean salad in those small glass bowls. Then, the hot vegetables, turnip greens, candied yams, green beans with bacon, macaroni and cheese that's actually baked, not microwaved. The meats? Fried chicken, baked ham with pineapple, Salisbury steak, pot roast with gravy. The woman behind the counter asks how many pieces of chicken. You say 2. She puts them on your plate with tongs, adds a yeast roll from a basket that's constantly being refilled. You move to desserts, coconut cream pie, banana pudding, red velvet cake, sweet potato pie. You choose 1, maybe 2. The cashier at the end tallies everything. $2.85 for a full dinner. You find a table. The room hums with conversation, the sound of hundreds of people eating together, separately. This was cafeteria dining in 1970s America, and for millions of people, it was a regular part of life. The American cafeteria tradition started in the late 1800s, but it reached its peak in the mid-20th century. By the 1970s, cafeteria chains had become woven into the fabric of everyday life, especially in the South and Midwest, but also in major cities across the country. These weren't just restaurants. They were gathering places, daily routines, and economic anchors for working families. What made cafeterias different was the visibility. You saw what you were getting. No hidden preparation, no mystery meat. The food was displayed under heat lamps or in steam tables, prepared in large batches throughout the day. You chose what you wanted, paid by the item, and ate in dining rooms that could hold hundreds of people at once. And then, slowly, they started disappearing. If you lived in New York City or Philadelphia in the 1970s, you knew the Automat. Not exactly a cafeteria, but close. A mechanical cafeteria where the food sat behind small glass windows. You inserted nickels, the window opened, and you took your plate. No servers, no conversation, just you, the machine, and the food. Horn and hard art had been around since 1902, but by the 70s, the automats were becoming relics. The mechanism was expensive to maintain, labor costs were rising, fast food was cheaper and faster. But in 1975, there were still a dozen automats operating in Manhattan. Commuters stopped in for coffee and pie. Elderly people on fixed incomes stretched their dollars with macaroni and beans. Students grabbed a cheap meal between classes. The last Horn and Hard Art automat closed in 1991, but in the 70s it was still holding on, a piece of the future that had somehow become the past. Morrison's was the king of Southern cafeterias. Founded in Mobile, Alabama in 1920, it expanded aggressively through the mid-century, opening locations in shopping malls and standalone buildings across the Southeast. By the 1970s, Morrison's was everywhere: Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Louisiana. Sunday after church, Morrison's was where you went. The parking lot would be packed by 11:30. Families in their church clothes, kids squirming in stiff shoes, mothers balancing purses and checking their lipstick in the reflection of the glass doors. Inside, the line moved with a certain rhythm. Everyone knew the drill. The food was Southern, reliable and abundant. Fried okra, black-eyed peas, cornbread dressing, collard greens, country fried steak with white gravy, and desserts that looked like they came from someone's grandmother's kitchen, because often they did. The recipes were regional, passed down, adapted for mass production, but still recognizable. Morrison's survived longer than most, operating into the 2000s, but it was never the same after the 1980s. The company went through bankruptcies, buyouts, and closures. The last Morrison's closed in 2016, but in the 70s, it was still thriving, a weekly ritual for millions. Wyatt Cafeterias operated primarily in Texas and the Southwest during the 1960s and 70s. The chain was smaller than Morrison's or Piccadilly, but it had a devoted following. Wyatt locations were often found in shopping centers, convenient, accessible, designed for the car-dependent suburbs that were sprawling across America. Wyatt's was one of the big 5 cafeteria chains operating in Texas, with locations concentrated in Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth. The menu featured standard cafeteria fare: fried chicken, roast beef, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and vegetables prepared fresh daily. The food was reliable, the portions generous, and the prices competitive with other chains like Morrison's and Piccadilly. Wyatt didn't survive the 1980s. The chain closed gradually, location by location, as shopping mall traffic patterns changed and newer restaurant concepts moved in. By the early 1990s, Wyatt was gone, but for a generation of Texans, it was where they ate dinner on Wednesdays, where they celebrated birthdays, where they learned to navigate a cafeteria line. S&W Cafeteria was a North Carolina institution. The chain started in Charlotte in 1920 and expanded through the Carolinas and into Virginia. By the 1970s, S&W locations were fixtures in downtown districts and shopping centers. The restaurants had a distinctive look: colonial-style architecture, brass fixtures, dark wood paneling. The food was classic Southern cafeteria: fried chicken, country ham, butter beans, squash casserole, hush puppies, and desserts like lane cake and lemon chess pie. But S&W also had a reputation for doing vegetables right. The cooks knew how to season greens without overcooking them, how to make squash that didn't turn to mush, how to prepare fresh corn when it was in season. S&W struggled in the late 19th century. Locations closed one by one. The last S&W cafeteria closed in 2014. For decades, though, it was part of the routine, the place you took your grandmother for lunch, the place you stopped after shopping, the place that felt permanent. Bishop's operated in the Midwest, primarily Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas from the 1940s through the 1980s. The chain was known for comfort food served in no-frills dining rooms. The aesthetic was utilitarian: linoleum floors, formica tables, fluorescent lights. But the food was substantial: pot roast, chicken and noodles, meatloaf with ketchup glaze, mashed potatoes with real butter, green bean casserole, dinner rolls that came out of the oven throughout the evening, and pies: cherry, apple, rhubarb, custard, sitting in glass cases at the end of the line. Bishop's closed in the late 1980s and early 1990s as fast food chains and casual dining restaurants reshaped the Midwest's eating landscape. The cafeteria model, which had worked for decades, couldn't compete with drive-thrus and value menus. Bishop's disappeared quietly, location by location, until it was just a memory. Forum cafeterias operated primarily in the Midwest during the 1960s and 70s, with locations concentrated in Kansas City and Minneapolis. The chain positioned itself as slightly more upscale than typical cafeterias: better lighting, carpeted dining rooms, cloth napkins on some occasions. But the model was the same: steam tables, self-service, pay by the item. Forum tried to attract business lunches and evening diners who wanted something nicer than fast food, but more affordable than a traditional sit-down restaurant. For a while, it worked. Forum locations in Kansas City and Minneapolis did steady business, but the positioning was awkward: too expensive to be a daily habit for working-class families, not fancy enough to be a special occasion destination. By the mid-1980s, Forum was closing locations. The chain couldn't find its niche in a rapidly changing restaurant market. Casual dining chains like Applebee's and Chili's offered similar prices with table service and alcohol. Forum faded away, remembered now mainly by people who worked there or ate there regularly. Boar Cafeteria started in Kentucky in 1931 and expanded across the South and Midwest. Locations operated in Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, but also in Memphis and Nashville, Tennessee, Little Rock, Arkansas, and even Cleveland, Ohio. The name came from an Old English pub tradition, but the food was thoroughly American. and thoroughly Southern. Fried chicken, of course, country ham, pinto beans cooked with ham hock, cornbread, sliced tomatoes in summer, coleslaw made fresh daily, and burgoo, a Kentucky stew tradition that Blue Boar served in the fall and winter months. Blue Boar's decline mirrored the broader cafeteria industry collapse. The chain closed its last location in 2003. For people across Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, and beyond, though, Blue Boar remains a vivid memory. The place their parents took them for Sunday dinner, the place they went after high school graduations, the place that smelled like home cooking on an institutional scale. Clifton's was unlike any other cafeteria in America. Located in downtown Los Angeles, Clifton's wasn't just a place to eat, it was an experience. The original location, Clifton's Brookdale, opened in 1935 and featured an indoor forest theme, artificial trees, a waterfall, taxidermied animals, and neon lighting. It was bizarre and beloved in equal measure. The food was California cafeteria style, lighter than Southern cafeterias with more salads, fresh vegetables, and seafood options. But Clifton's also had a social mission. During the Depression, the founder implemented a pay-what-you-can policy. Even in the 1970s, Clifton's remained affordable and welcoming to everyone: office workers, tourists, homeless people, students. Clifton's Brookdale closed in 2011, then reopened in 2015 as a renovated bar and restaurant. It's not the same. The original Clifton's, the one that served Jell-O salads and meatloaf under artificial trees, is gone. But in the 70s, it was still there, still strange, still serving. Bickford's operated in the Northeast, primarily New York and New England, from the early 1900s through the 1980s. The chain started as a cafeteria and lunch counter hybrid, serving quick meals to workers and shoppers in urban areas. By the 1970s, Bickford's locations were scattered across Manhattan, Boston, and smaller northeastern cities. The menu was straightforward: sandwiches, soups, roast beef dinners, pancakes, coffee. The atmosphere was functional, clean, bright, efficient. You went to Bickford's when you needed to eat, not when you wanted an experience. Bickford's closed most of its locations in the 1980s. A few survived into the early 2000s, but by then they were anachronisms, holdouts from an earlier era. The last Bickford's closed in 2002. For New Yorkers who grew up in the mid-century, though, Bickford's was a constant, the place you could always count on for a cheap, filling meal. The decline of cafeteria chains happened gradually, then suddenly. Multiple forces converged in the 1980s and 90s to dismantle a business model that had worked for decades. First, fast food got faster and cheaper. McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's perfected the drive-thru. You could feed a family for less money and less time than a cafeteria meal. The convenience was undeniable. Second, casual dining chains exploded. Applebee's, Chili's, and Ruby Tuesday offered table service, alcohol, and a more modern atmosphere at prices that weren't much higher than cafeterias. For many families, the cafeteria started to feel dated, too institutional, too reminiscent of school or hospital food. Third, demographics shifted. Cafeterias had thrived on multi-generational family dining and retiree traffic. But as baby boomers aged and their eating habits changed, the customer base eroded. Younger generations didn't have the same attachment to cafeteria dining. To them, it was something their grandparents did. Fourth, real estate economics changed. Cafeterias needed large spaces, big kitchens, long serving lines, dining rooms that could hold hundreds. Mall leases became expensive. Standalone buildings in suburban areas couldn't compete with strip mall restaurants that had lower overhead. And finally, food culture changed. The 1990s and 2000s brought an obsession with novelty, ethnic cuisines, and foodie culture. Cafeterias served the same thing every day. That consistency, which had once been reassuring, became boring. But here's the part people rarely talk about. Cafeterias weren't just about food. They were about visibility and choice within constraints. You could see everything before you chose. You could adjust your meal to your budget, skip the meat, load up on vegetables, take one dessert or two. The pricing was transparent. There were no hidden fees, no surprise charges. Cafeterias were also democratizing spaces. You sat wherever there was room. A family of 5 at one table, an elderly couple at the next, a lone businessman reading the newspaper nearby. Different generations, different incomes, different backgrounds, all eating the same food in the same room. There was something communal about it. Even when you were eating alone, you were part of a shared experience. The food was familiar, the routine was predictable, and in the 1970s, when American life was becoming more fragmented, more individualized, cafeterias offered a kind of continuity. They were also training grounds. Children learned to navigate a line, make choices, carry a tray, interact with servers. The cafeteria taught patience. You waited your turn. It taught decision-making. You couldn't have everything, so you had to prioritize. It taught money management. You saw the prices, you calculated the total, you made it work. When cafeterias closed, those lessons didn't transfer to drive-thrus or fast casual restaurants. The visibility disappeared. The communal space disappeared. The ritual disappeared. A few cafeteria chains still exist. Piccadilly operates a handful of locations in the South. Luby's filed for bankruptcy in 2020, but still has a few restaurants open. Furr's survives in a diminished form, but these are remnants, not a thriving industry. The cafeteria model hasn't completely died, it's just moved. Corporate cafeterias, hospital cafeterias, and college dining halls still use steam tables and self-service lines, but they're utilitarian, not destinations. No one chooses to eat there. You eat there because you're already there. Every few years, someone tries to revive the cafeteria concept with a modern twist. Upscale vegetables, farm-to-table ingredients, industrial chic design. These experiments usually fail. The economics don't work. The nostalgia isn't enough to sustain a business. What remains is memory. People who grew up eating at Morrison's or Wyatt or S&W still talk about it. They remember specific dishes, the chicken, the rolls, the pie. They remember the routine. They remember who they went with. Compare the cafeteria experience to how we eat now. Food is faster, more convenient, more customizable. You can order from your phone and have it delivered to your door. You can specify every modification, every substitution, every preference. But you eat alone, usually, or you eat while doing something else, watching TV, scrolling through your phone, working. The meal isn't the point, it's fuel, consumed quickly and forgotten. Cafeterias required you to be present. You stood in line. You made choices in real time. You carried your tray to a table. You sat down. You ate. The meal had a beginning, a middle, and an end. There was also something honest about cafeteria food. It was what it was. Fried chicken was fried chicken, not artisanal herb-crusted airline breast or some other marketing language. Mashed potatoes were mashed potatoes. The food didn't pretend to be anything other than what you saw on your plate. Maybe that's what we miss most. Not the food itself, but the straightforwardness, the lack of pretense, the sense that everyone, rich or poor, young or old, was eating the same meal, together but separate, in a space that didn't demand anything from you except that you show up and choose. If you remember these cafeterias, if you stood in line at Morrison's on Sunday afternoons, if you ate at Wyatt after shopping, if you stopped at Bickford's on your lunch break, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me, which cafeteria did you go to? What dish do you still remember? Who did you go with? These places shaped daily life for millions of Americans. They're gone now, mostly, but the memories remain. And those memories matter. Thanks for watching. If this brought back memories, share it with someone who might remember too. And I'll see you in the next one.